Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. We'd also like to urge those of you who haven't yet done so, to sign our online petition for an inquiry into the BBC and Channel 4's coverage of Lewis Hamilton and Abu Dhabi, which we have amended to include Gary Lineker's sacking by the BBC. A link has been provided in the description. If you are on X, then please repost our tweet. Thank you. We don't mean to brag, and we don't mean to boast, but we know what F1 has become. It has now become a shooting gallery for John Malone to shoot down the integrity of the sport. It is no longer a case of man and machine competing at the highest level of motorsport, it is now a case of man and machine competing at his whim. Just before the Azerbaijan GP, we published a video titled, "Can Max Verstappen overtake Oscar Piastri to win F1 title as McLaren slip up again at Azerbaijan GP?" We'd always understood that a desperate Malone would not settle for Oscar running away with the world title with 8 races to go, as this in his opinion would hamper the marketability of the 2 remaining US Grands Prix, including the cherished Las Vegas GP, that was always projected to be the jewel in the crown. This particular GP has been tanking badly since its very expensive introduction in 2023. To make matters worse, because it was a street race, F1 took over the streets much to the displeasure of many locals, and the projected influx of visitors which was supposed to compensate them and the hoteliers never materialized because the title race had devolved into a procession for you-know-who. So, understanding the lie of the land, we fully expected F1 to start reining Oscar back and boosting Max's chances, so they could spin the narrative that the title race was very much alive. They understood that they couldn't rely on Oscar's laggard teammate to provide a credible challenge because this would be the second time that he has failed to deliver on the script. Last year was supposed to have been a title race between him and Max, but it ended up with the Red Bull driver winning his 4th consecutive title by the widest margin ever, while his team finished a distant third as McLaren won their first team title in 26 years. This year, it was supposed to have been a 3-way battle between the McLaren duo and Red Bull's sole driver, with the possibility of Max sneaking the title as the 2 McLaren drivers took points off each other. But Oscar tore up the script and turned the title race into his procession as he opened a 32-point lead ahead of his teammate and 94 ahead of Max, before arriving at Azerbaijan with 8 GPs to go. Before Azerbaijan, he was the only one of the trio to have scored points in all the 16 races, and at this stage he would need to not score any points in a few of the 8 remaining races to give the other 2 any chance of overhauling him. So, he would need to go from a 100% point scoring record to not scoring in at least 1 out of every 4 races going forward. In addition, the chasing duo had to maximize those opportunities, especially in the case of Max, who was 94 points adrift. We all know what a loyal toady the American team boss of McLaren, Zak Brown, is to the American owner of F1, so it was not surprising to find that the team had started looking for ways to shoot Oscar down. Just 2 races before Azerbaijan they had denied Oscar victory when they refused his request to go on to a tyre strategy that they subsequently placed his recovering teammate on, and which ended up giving him a narrow victory. 2 races before that in Great Britain, they also declined Oscar's request for Lando to yield position to him, to compensate for the unfair penalty that the FIA had given him, for what was actually an infraction by Max. So, how then could McLaren ask him to yield position to Lando in Italy to compensate for the slow pit stop that Lando had suffered during the race? This inexplicable decision resulted in Lando being roundly booed on the podium by the Tifosi. The only plausible explanation is that Zak was acting on his boss's orders, to shoot Oscar down, so that the chasing pack could close the gap. Yet despite all these shots fired at the young Australian, he came into Azerbaijan with a comfortable lead over the FIA-preferred duo of Max and Lando. We were therefore convinced that McLaren and the FIA were on a mission to sabotage Oscar at every opportunity going forward, and this was what informed the title of our previous video covering the Azerbaijan GP. Oscar had been so consistent before Azerbaijan that, not only had he scored points in every race till then, but he also topped the lights to flag table with 4, followed by Lando with 3 and Max bringing up the rear with 1. On race victories he had an even bigger lead with 7, followed again by Lando with 5, and Max bringing up the rear with 2. Critically, if he hadn't been robbed of 2 victories in Britain and Hungary by his own team, that were then gifted to Lando, he would have an even bigger lead, with 9 victories and Lando on 3, with Max lagging further back on 2. But for the show of shame in Italy, Oscar would now be 31 points ahead of his teammate in second place, rather than the current 25, and in the case of Max, it would be a 72-point lead rather than the current 69 points. If we now factored the victories stolen in Britain and Hungary into the equation, Oscar would have a 59-point lead over Lando and a whopping 86-point lead over Max. So, you can see how just on team strategy alone, Malone's gopher at McLaren has kept Lando in touch with Oscar, as he is now within 1 more DNF of being level. But here's the thing, despite all their machinating, they know that they cannot rely on Lando to keep the fight going, so they had to bring Max into play. That is why the car that Max had routinely complained was not competitive, has powered him to 2 commanding lights to flag victories in the last 2 races. Even though ceteris paribus, Oscar should be out of his reach, a Max resurgence provides F1 with the opportunity to sell a title race going into Malone's hallowed territory in America. Max, the least scoring and most inconsistent of the trio, is now the only one to have had 2 lights to flag victories in succession, bringing his victory tally to 4. Nevertheless, even though Max is 44 points adrift of Lando, who in turn is only 25 points adrift of champion-designate Oscar, we would expect that he has a greater chance of overhauling Lando than Lando has of overhauling Oscar. So, the question is, how far are McLaren prepared to go to hold Oscar back for Malone's benefit? The booing in Italy has Lando and McLaren joining Max and Red Bull as the other pantomime villains in F1. Don't know about you, but for us, it is just too much of a coincidence that in the wake of McLaren sabotaging Oscar, Max's supposedly uncompetitive car is now head and shoulders above the competition. Despite steadily sabotaging Oscar, they rightly don't have enough confidence that Lando can mount a title challenge, so they are having to give Max a boost so they can sell the illusion that he can mount a Lewis Hamilton-style surge to the title. It remains to be seen if and how they will continue firing shots at Oscar, because Lando will need all the help they can give him to catch and overhaul his teammate. As far as Max is concerned, it will take a few more DNFs before he can get anywhere near Oscar. In the unlikely event that Lando somehow pips Oscar to the title, how will the public, especially those down under, react? Will Lando become as popular as Max, Zach and Andrea as popular as Christian, and McLaren as popular as Red Bull? Forza Ferrari.